30 Minutes with Martin Sorrell, coming to you from the south of France. Good to have you back.
It's a
and welcome to Cannes.
tough life, Pavni, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But I want to ask you this. You've been coming to Cannes for how many years now, if I can?
Oh, more than I care to admit.
Okay.
Must be about 7 or 8 years. Actually, I never used to come because it was very much a sort of narrow event, very much actually a French event because it was run by Roger Hatchwell until he sold it to Terry Savage and EMAP, I think it was. It's been much more broadened. I think it's been broadened too far. We were talking about it downstairs before we started, and I think probably it's probably got too much sizzle and not enough steak. You know, the content, I don't mean content in a Vice or full screen sense, but I mean content in terms of insight and value added. You know, it's whose boat is bigger than somebody else's, and
that's the competition.
Whose act is bigger than somebody else's. And it's not what it should be about. It should be so the sort of stuff we do with what we call Stream that we do on the Tuesday.
I'm going to come to that.
Thank goodness, I was trying to promote Stream.
I will come to that. But before that, I want to ask you this. You've been sending, I mean, WPP has been sending delegates to Cannes year after year.
Too many.
Why do you think this? But that's a lot of money, a lot of investment. Why is it important? Or are you going to cut back now?
Well, this is the Oscars of the industry. So it's like going to Los Angeles or Hollywood in the context of our industry. Now, I think that we should celebrate that. I think that's a wonderful thing to do for our clients and for our people. And our clients and our people are increasingly engaged with Cannes, which is very good. Obviously, technology has increasingly become part of Cannes. The media have become part of Cannes. But the Cannes is become more like a CES, which may be a good thing, by the way. And good things that we include healthcare. It was the preamble to Cannes, which I think a number of people felt that was not the right thing. But next year that's corrected because healthcare becomes part of the awards. Data visualization or the data industry, not this year, but next year I understand will be included too, which is great for us because our qualifiable revenues for Cannes are actually the smallest of the top 3 because if you take out Kantar, which is 25% of our revenues, it means our qualifying revenues for Cannes are smaller than either Omnicom or indeed, I think, even Publicis. So Cannes is becoming broader, and I think technology, data, healthcare are all good signals. But having said that, it's too much of a sizzle. It really should focus, I think, more on insight.
More meat, like you said.
Yeah, more content. More, content not in the sense of Vice or full screen. I don't mean in that sense. But that's part of it. I mean, that's an important part of it because content and focus on content. You know, we're doing a session with Dick Costello of Twitter and with Philippe Doman of Viacom, and that, you know, will focus, I think, a fair bit on the content issue. That's part of it. But I mean content instead of real meat. That, you know, a client can go away from, or one of our people can go away from it and say, I learned something. You know, this has become a bit too much like Davos, I think, or the CES.
You spoke about Stream. I want to come to that. So will we see more focused events like that? Because, like you mentioned,
as long as they're WPP events, as long as nobody else is watching this, none of our competitors. No, I think Stream is really good. I mean, actually, Stream here is not an unconference.
Okay.
Stream came out of an Israeli kibbutz. Yossi Vardi, Israeli entrepreneur, quite a well-known internet entrepreneur who we work with, had the idea. My wife was at that thing, and she said it was an interesting concept, and out of that came that discussion. And Kinneret, where it was originally, came the idea we'd do an unconference, which means you go to the conference, there's a whiteboard, and you put up on the board what you want to talk about. So, you know, multi-sessions, and you decide, you know, if you want to talk about, you know, Google hiring, why are Google hiring all these very high-level marketing executives from Procter & Gamble and GlaxoSmithKline and L'Oreal and Unilever, you know, what's behind it. If you wanted to talk about that, you could sit down and talk about that and lead a discussion for an hour. But it's a crowdsourced conference in a sense, but actually, when you think about it, why should somebody sort of sit there with a Solomonic point of view about what you should be interested in if you come to a conference. You should be the person if you come to a conference, and particularly if you pay a fee, which you don't pay, by the way. I mean, it's sponsored by the media owners, the technology companies, which I call media owners, and so we had CBS, we had Google, we had Facebook, so all of these people, Yahoo, are all sponsoring it and participating in it, because at this stream here in Cannes, we had about $50 billion of media spend represented amongst the CMOs that were part of it. But I think content of that nature, whether it's pre-programmed or whether it's an unconference, I think is really more meaningful. And I think that's the key. So we should focus on that.
Now you made two pronouncements. One is that brands.
Pronouncements, gosh.
Okay, statements. Can we go with that? Okay. Now you said that brands will do away with regional marketing structures.
No, we didn't say brands. I said organizations.
Okay, organizations will, and then you've said that brand.
I didn't say. No, you see,
is it out of context?
Indian media always like to
That's
sensationalize
not fair. That is
it.
not fair.
No, it isn't. No, what you said is not fair. Yeah.
Okay.
So what I said, if you looked at the slide that I use, actually, probably, which is the best thing. This is death by PowerPoint. It's not actually. So the slide says global, arrow going up, regional, arrow going down, local, arrow going up. What it means is, I think that what we're starting to see, I mean, why I'm delighted about this in a way, is that we've been writing about this in the annual report for many, many years. And what's happened is that we're seeing a few clients now, about 4 or 5 very big clients, starting to say they want a leaner, more active, more energetic, but more powerful center. They want more local emphasis. Coca-Cola, for example, operates in 220 countries. We operate in 110 countries. It's impossible for somebody sitting in Atlanta, with all due respect, or London in our case, or New York, to know everything that goes on
in Bombay.
In all the, let's taking India as an example. So Ranjan Kapoor is our country manager. His role is he has no authority, but he has the responsibility, because the verticals still have authority. He has the responsibility to find the best people, and I think we have very, very, very good people in India, find the best acquisitions, and we made very good acquisitions at the right prices in India. And last but not least, that we work with the very good local clients who are going to become the regional multinational clients of the, and you can't know that at the center. And what a number of these clients have been saying is that regional acts as a sort of buffer or stop. They have the power to say no, not the power to say yes. So stuff coming down the organization or coming up the organization sort of gets, and it's actually, if you take, which I think you should do, Brazil, Russia, India and China out of the regional structures and have them as direct reports, because they're such big countries and they are so important. That reduces the sizes of the regions and I think makes them much more manageable. Because the unfortunate thing is we treat India with 1.2 billion people, or China with 1.3 billion people, or Russia with 9 time zones or 7 time zones, I can't remember how many, the same way as we would treat Greece or Portugal, which makes no sense.
Yeah, that does.
Makes no sense.
I'm going to quote you again. Please tell me if this is
But
in
don't-
context. Okay.
See, this is the Twitter, the era of Twitter. Everything has to be reduced to 140 characters or less.
Yeah, this is a little more than that. So,
Okay, go on.
Okay, clients continue to put a pressure on costs to get to their numbers. It's difficult. The result of that pressure is what is driving more consolidation. You said that in the interview. That's okay?
Yeah, it's the law of unintended consequences, because clients want choice in selection of agencies. They probably want big agencies and small agencies and medium-sized agencies. The pressure that is totally understandable. I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying it's a fact. Post-Lehman, which was 2008 in particular, growth is sub-trend. India and the BRICS and Next 11 are not as fast growth as they used to be, although they're faster growth than the slow growth markets, the mature markets, which have got faster, but they're still growing slower than the faster growth markets. So India for us is up this year about 6 to 7%. Brazil is up 6 to 7%, which actually both cases are surprising, because India faced an election, although now the result is is settled.
And you're relieved to see the result, because I remember you said to an interview in Davos that you're not very sure and you're a little scared that you'll get a coalition government in India.
Well, I thought that I think a more decisive result. I mean,
is always
more
better.
Decisiveness is better because more balanced coalitions result in indecisiveness, because you have to bargain and compromise, and sometimes what you need is decisive policies and decisive action. But you know, and Brazil faces an election, so we're still strong, 6 to 7% with the World Cup, etc. The two markets of the BRICS, which have had a much more of a struggle, are China, for us, where we're flat in the first quarter, had a strong April, not so strong May as April, but still better. And then Russia, which has been affected to some extent by the Crimea and the Ukraine. But the fundamental point is the growth, the top line growth is not there as much as people would like. Growth is subtrend, so therefore in order to get to their targets, clients have had to cut costs and put pressure on costs.
Yeah.
As a result of that, there's pressure, procurement pressure on the agencies. It can come in the form of pricing, it can come in the form of payment terms, all those things. And that has resulted in agencies feeling the heat, smaller agencies not being as successful as they used to be, or even selling out. Larger agencies consolidating more, and all I'm saying is consolidation will continue.
What I wanted to ask you actually is that after the Publicis Omnicom group collapse, what form and shape
they
will we
haven't collapsed to be.
Okay.
You see it again. This is.
Okay.
I mean, I wish they had, but they haven't.
I meant the merger. I mean the group, the Publicis Omnicom group that would have. I mean,
a dead POG is better than a live POG.
In what form will we see consolidation? Because this.
Well, I think there are two. You know, there are two possibilities at the moment. Now, we never thought the POG was a glint in Maurice's or John's eyes, but it was. So God knows what else is happening here. But you know, because this time last year, John was climbing the back stairs in the Carlton Hotel to see Maurice secretly, and maybe actually that's part of the problem, because the two of them tried to negotiate this deal with what they said no expensive advisors, and maybe they should have had expensive advisors because it showed. But I would say two things. One is IPG with Dentsu. My own view is, for what it's worth, and I get these things wrong, but here goes. I think it's inevitable that Dentsu will buy IPG. I don't think it's inevitable that Havas becomes part of Vivendi, but I think, you know, if I was Vincent Bolloré, I would try and do that. I'd try and sort of monetize my stake, or not monetize my stake, switch my stake in Havas into Vivendi, which is a much bigger company, and have, say, 10% of Vivendi instead of having 5 or 6%, although it does control it. It would be a bit difficult because you have a media owner owning an agency, so there's a clear conflict issue, but maybe in France that will be something that will be accepted, and that's where, you know, their business is really pivotal. So I think those are the two things. Beyond that, we will continue to do what we did in Vietnam yesterday, what we did in South Africa with the Hardy Boys a couple of days ago, what we did with Kantar and Millward Brown, part of Kantar, in two situations in the last week. We did about 50 or 60 transactions of various sorts last year. We've already done about almost 30 already this year. So we carry on at a clip. It has an impact on our revenues of about 2 to 3%. So if we're growing organically as we are at the moment, about 4%, not at the revenue level, but at the net sales level, at revenue we're growing at 7 to 8%. And you add acquisitions as pre-currency, the devaluation of the Indian rupee and others.
Which is crashing as we speak.
Well, you know, that's having a big effect on multinationals, because those companies that have big positions, like we do in India or Brazil or Russia or South Africa, they as the rand, you said, collapses, but certainly devalues and depreciates. So in the last quarter of last year, we saw the rand off almost 30% in one quarter.
But how do you see the next 6 months panning out for WPP revenue-wise, and how concerned are you about the situation in Iraq? You know, because oil prices have been impacted.
Yes, over 110 Brent. I think this is a really good question or good point. You know, we tended to focus on hard soft landing of the BRICS, the Eurozone, the strength of the US economies, those sorts of issues, what we call the grey swans. The black swans are the ones that you don't, the unknown unknowns. The grey swans are the known unknowns. But I think your point about geopolitical, I mean, when I was in Davos, it was the Sino-Japanese spat over, the Chinese-Japanese spat over the islands. Then we had the Crimea. Now we have Iraq. These were things, Tony Blair, I think, said it was predictable, but, those of us not as intelligent as him didn't predict it. So you're right. I think the geopolitical risks are, now they have the habit of triggering, and it's the straw that breaks the camel back. The big issue, I think, from an economic point of view is the impact of tapering, because at some point in time, cheap money has to turn into more expensive money, and there's the question about what's the impact. That's what triggered the devaluations that we saw in the fast growth markets. So I think the honest answer is that then makes clients even more cautious. Average life of a CEO is about 4 to 6 years.
And more pressure on costs than like you mentioned earlier.
Exactly.
Okay. Now you'll be in India in about 2 months. And for brand, is brand Z or brand Z?
Whatever you like. It depends on where you are.
I'll say brand Z because we follow the British system
of the
alphabet.
I'm delighted to hear that India follows the British system. They may not be quite so delighted.
It's a 200 year, 200 year. So what's on the agenda then for other than brand Z?
Well, no, it's just my usual kicking the tires. I mean, our business, as I said, in India is doing extremely well. I mean, against the market, we must be gaining significant share in India. We've strengthened the business this year considerably. We had a good year last year, and our people. Listen, I've said this to you 100 times, and I'll say it again. If our people were as good outside India as they are as good inside India, I could have retired and wouldn't have to bother to be even in Cannes. Would have retired to a beach somewhere a long time ago. So no, I mean our business is exceptional, and it's all systems go. We always have our challenges. We always have, but that's what we're here to deal with.
So what is the biggest challenge in India currently?
Well, making sure that we continue to grow. I mean, we had competitors trying to snap at our heels and making ill-judged acquisitions. Where the chickens are coming home to roost, I'm delighted to say. The economic, I mean, actually, when you think about it for a minute, if you have a weak position in a market like India and you're running a global business, the logic that you will use is, well, I'll overpay here or structure it poorly here because, in the context of things,
it doesn't matter.
But when you start to do it in 3 or 4 places, the chickens do come home to roost. So. No, look, we've been at it for a long time. We have an advantage. I mean, we were very lucky. That's the truth. So in '87, when we acquired what I hope will be called J. Walter Thompson Company, or the JWT Group as it then was, including Hill & Knowlton, MRB, when we acquired them, they had a big operation in India. When we acquired Ogilvy in '89, big operation in India. When we acquired Y&R, they had an operation in India. When we acquired Gray, they had an operation in India, and then everything else, TNS and everybody else. So we've been very fortunate. Okay, so we had IMRB there as an outstanding business. The TAM business, with all of the questions, outstanding business. So, and when I say outstanding business, I don't mean what people think I mean, which is revenues and profitability. What I mean is outstanding people, and which after all. That's where we invest 60% of our revenues around. We invest in human capital, not physical capital. So I think that's the secret of the success in India. So the biggest challenge is you're strong, is keeping it that way. And because everybody, ours is a very competitive industry. I mean, it's true that people present themselves in the most positive way, but at the same time, it's a very competitive and highly competent. There are highly competent competitors, sadly. We wish they were all totally incompetent and totally amateur. Sometimes they do some amateur things, but by and large it's a very competitive environment.
Okay, then we'll see you next month to discuss
Absolutely.
much more. We'll see you in India
And
after 2 months.
we'll talk about the great
Yes.
Indian brands.
Okay, thank you so
Thanks
much.
very much
Nice to
indeed.
meet you.
Thank you.